Viltrox 50mm f2 Air Review. The Viltrox 50mm f2 is a full-frame lens available for Nikon Z and Sony E-mount, and it's relatively inexpensive at $199 US. I'll be reviewing it for the Nikon Z system. Note that I got this lens for free to make a review, but I was not told what to say, and the opinions in this review are my own. Basic physical features. It's a pretty bare lens with a focus ring, and it comes with a lens hood. It's got a metal mount, and on the mount is a USB port for firmware updates. And it's got 9 aperture blades. Overall, the lens feels solid. The filter ring is 58mm, which is nice because it's a very common filter size. So what's my take on this lens? Strengths. This lens is pretty sharp, and I compared it to the Nikon 50mm f1.4Z at various apertures. At f2, both lenses in the center look very similar and a little soft. And at f4, the lenses sharpen up, but again, they are very similar with a slight edge to the Nikon. The Viltrox has a bit of an edge in the corners. Overall, the Viltrox is thus very similar to the Nikon 50mm f1.4Z and thus a bit weaker than the Nikon 50mm f1.8S. The Viltrox also has way less chromatic aberrations than the Nikon 50mm f1.4. That's pretty good for such an inexpensive lens. The bokeh of this lens is also fairly nice. The 9 aperture blades make the bokeh fairly smooth. Stop down, the bokeh circles still look pretty circular, but they have a slight edge. In very bright lights, you might see a bit of a hard edge to some of the bokeh. There's also a little bit of cat's eye effect in the bokeh, but surprisingly, it's not very strong. I also like how light this lens is. In terms of size, it's very similar to the f-mount 50mm f1.8G. So, it's a great lens for video use on a gimbal. Weaknesses. In my mind, this lens has 3 small weaknesses. The first is that it vignettes noticeably. It's not too hard to correct, but it's there. Stopping down alleviates the effect a little, but even at f8, it is noticeable. The second weakness is the autofocus. It's pretty good, but it has a clicky sound when it's starting and stopping, and it's not as solid as my Nikon 50mm f1.4Z. Here is a very close-up sound recording of it focusing. And now, here's a close-up sound recording of the 50mm f1.4Z. Overall, I'd describe it as accurate, but a little nervous. The final potential weakness is that it does have a little bit of odd flaring in some cases. In practice, it appears very rarely, but can appear with very bright point sources of light. Conclusion. In my opinion, the Viltrox 50mm f2 Air has just enough performance to satisfy the majority of users. It's about the same as the Nikon 50mm f1.4 in terms of sharpness, but not as good as the 50mm f1.8S. So in other words, very decent, but not groundbreaking. Basically, it's a lot like the classic nifty 50s of the DSLR days. For $199, it's a good value for Nikon and Sony shooters looking for a small prime for portraits or landscapes. That's it. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I'll see you again next time.